Why might non-Orthodox Christians desire that IOTA do its work excellently? Why might the broader Christian church desire that IOTA do its work excellently? And I'll offer 3 brief points on this. A theme that will pervade all of the points is that I think the hope would be not only that the theological work produced by IOTA would provide certain content and certain answers to theological conundrums faced both in the East and the West, but also, and perhaps even more significantly, the certain kind of theological style and certain kind of ecclesial style by which these conversations are had in Western Christianity has hit several very significant roadblocks that I, speaking very directly, would hope that a witness from the Orthodox intellectual firepower gathered by IOTA would help us to overcome. And so I'll mention 3 things in that regard. The first has to do with the legacy of Nicene Christology, and I speak as a Lutheran for whom the fact of what was achieved in Nicene Christology is not only one of the great achievements in the history of theology, but is simply one of the great achievements in human thought, full stop. And with that in mind, and with that framework, I would want to say that I think it's no exaggeration to say that the legacy of the richness of Nicene Christology in many sectors of Western Christianity is under threat. I think that, therefore, that to the extent of what we heard yesterday, that throughout the various sections and papers that we'll see from IOTA's work, the rigorously Christological focus, with its accompanying pneumatological focus, and the way in which cultural criticism, politics, and so on proceed from that basis. It's a small point, but again, I think that methodologically, it cannot be overstated how important that sequencing is. And I would say that too in terms of the ecclesial life of the church. Sequencing also relates to the question of idolatry. I define idolatry personally as, in most cases, a good gift of God that is somehow out of sequence or somehow out of proportion. We're not tempted to make idols out of things that we know are bad. We make idols out of things that we know to be good, but simply invest them either with undue priority or put them out of sequence in some other way. And in the many Western church contexts, things that I very much support, such as diversity, inclusion, welcome, in many contexts have become the event itself, have become the thing itself, and precisely because they are such good things, they become such tempting idols. I could say more about that if you like, but that's another instance of how I think this sequencing, particularly the Christological sequencing that IOTA will be about, will be significant for the church more broadly. The second point would have to do with theological innovation vis-a-vis the church. It seems to me that within Orthodoxy, as it moves more and more into the purview and the mainstream of the Western theological conversation, it can offer a fresh perspective around issues of reception, around issues of conciliarism, new frameworks for thinking about how individual theological authorship can be placed in service to the church without going heavily into either the concrete magisterium or the marketplace. Now, I want to be clear, I don't know exactly what that would look like, but it would be a hope for something that could be achieved through the work of organizations like IOTA. And then the third would have to do with something that came up very strongly yesterday, and that's simply the question of global epistemologies. As was mentioned yesterday, as the center of gravity across the church moves into the global south, many of the Protestant bodies that I work with are no exception. There are more Lutherans, for instance, in Indonesia than there are in all of Europe combined at this point. The fastest growing Lutheran church in the world is Mekane Yesu in Ethiopia. And as was discussed briefly yesterday, with these geographic shifts and demographic shifts, one of the things we see are new kinds of epistemological questions emerging. And I offer that simply as an example to say that already in the conversations yesterday and in conversations that I've observed as an ecumenical observer in the Orthodox world, the somewhat porous nature of how different epistemologies across the global Orthodox Church could have something very helpful to teach us in the West as the entire vitality of the Christian movement moves more and more into the global South, into Africa, and so on. So again, with all three of these, I would hope that what the Christian churches outside of Orthodoxy can look to IOTA to do is not simply to produce excellent content and excellent answers, but to model ways of having these conversations that will help us out of some of the conundrums that are not only stifling the work of academic theology, but I think preventing the entire Christian witness across the world from reaching its full potential. So, thank you.
I love the intellectual energy that's been in the room. I love the intensity that there's been at times. There's been a kind of quiet fire that sort of opened up from here and there, parts of the room. I've loved the sophistication, the intellectual sophistication in play. I've loved the diversity, and I've enjoyed watching the tension that shows up from time to time. I love the absence of what you might call simply the polemical dispositions that so often corrupt our conversations. It's really been marvelous the way you've avoided that. And I want to take away a phrase from my fellow Irishman, Alexis, when he spoke about the need for a certain prophetic force and decisiveness in the work that you do. And I can feel that, and I can sense that. This is serious business. This is not just playing around. This is really serious stuff, theologically, politically, morally, and otherwise. And there's been a wonderful sense of that here. Now, over the 30 years, I've now watched massive transitions, if I may say so, and I see them visible here in the Orthodox internal developments. One is that the East-West disjunction is being eroded. Paul used to sort of like chastise me because I sort of loved what I found within Orthodoxy so much I was ready to forgive you everything and anything and romanticize and idealize. And I've gotten over that, I'm happy to say. And part of it's because of the work of people in this room, and so that disjunction between East and West has been eroded. I feel a deeper sense of self-criticism, which is very, very important. Now, a couple of friendly improvements. Please don't be afraid to use the E word, for those of you who are in missiology. Evangelism, I taught it for 10 years actually. I even got tenure in it. And the thing to do is to own the term and fill it with your meaning. Don't be intimidated by somebody else's meaning, that's my view. Secondly, I detect a fascinating ambiguity in the political theology group. And I discussed this with the colleagues over breakfast. In that it's not clear to me whether the issue there is, for many in the Orthodox tradition, you live in a world where it is culturally and politically left. That's clearly the case. And whether that's the issue then, are you speaking into that world, or whether you have a broader conception of political theology where you're going to deal with a wider range of issues at stake there, which I think has to include the resurgence of capitalism and the free market and all that goes with that. I think that needs attention from you, from us, and from all of us, and I'd love to see what you make of that. I see that you have a chance of working through issues with a much stronger theological tradition than, say, my own Methodist tradition has had. You've talked about playing catch-up. I would not take that as a negative. You have a chance to deal with issues, whether it be the women's issues or issues related to sexuality, and not make the mistakes that some of us have made, say in the Protestant tradition. And so I've been looking to see vast improvement in how that issue is worked through, how carefully it's discussed, how it's openly and honestly and frankly taken care of. And I think you should benefit from our mistakes. There's been a pathology in our discussion, and I think you ought to be aware of that. But what I would be looking for is that you can really help us do a much better job in that arena. Secondly, an issue that's not come up, but which is important even in my neck of the woods in Dallas of all places, and this has not been on the agenda, but I think the Eastern Orthodox tradition can clearly help us with the arrival of Islam in the West. Now, this was mentioned in the case of the Huntington thesis and whatnot, but I think it's for many of us who are coming to terms with that world, Eastern Orthodoxy has many years of experience of this matter, and it would help us enormously as you work your way through that.